As we count down to the long-awaited Uber team-up Avengers: Infinity War, out April 27, EW's Marvel Movie Club is preparing by revisiting the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe in the weeks leading up to the mega-sized movie. EU will revisit one Marvel movie a week, every week, to reassess its powers and hopefully answer important questions along the way, like, what was the Incredible Hulk? Does Nick Fury wash his eye patch, and is there a point to Hawkeye? This week, Chancellor Agard and Christian Holub find things to like about Joss Whedon's final Marvel movie, Avengers: Age of Ultron. Chancellor Agard, Avengers: Age of Ultron is one of my least favorite Marvel movies. It's bloated, messy, and features some of the most egregious future movie table setting in the entire franchise. See Thor's silly mystical hot tub scene. However, it's also one of the Marvel movies I think about the most because it engages with some very fascinating ideas. Joss Whedon's sad Marvel swan song is about power and control, about the dangers of acting out of fear, and also finds time to acknowledge that the rest of the world may not love the Avengers. Like the Avengers, it occasionally has a hangout vibe and a sense that it can joke its way out most serious situations. But overall, Age of Ultron, with its many heavy conversations between the Avengers and slightly more realistic foe, feels darker and way more thoughtful about this crazy world in which Tony and the rest of the heroes operate. While re-watching Age of Ultron this week, I could again feel that the movie was in the middle of a tug-of-war with two impulses: Whedon's desire to dig deeper into these demigod characters, and Marvel Studios' desire to set up the rest of its universe. But, with 3 years of distance, and being immersed in the MCU with this weekly column and our most recent issue, I found myself a bit more sympathetic to the movie than I was when I first saw it. Christian, how did you feel after re-watching Age of Ultron this week? Christian Holub: Hey, Chance. Thanks for letting me back onto the column. We last discussed the first Avengers movie, so I'm glad to be back for round 2. Funny enough, this is actually the second time I've revisited Age of Ultron since its release. I remember being pretty disappointed when it came out, but when I went back I found it utterly fascinating. That feeling has only intensified with this new rewatch. For both better and worse, Age of Ultron has Joss Whedon written all over it in a way few directors get to leave their imprint on massive superhero blockbusters like this. I think that's partly because these films have such sky-high budgets and expectations that they lean formulaic for fear of failure. But because Whedon perfected the superhero movie template with the first Avengers movie, thereby justifying the insane years-long experiment that is the MCU, he took a little more leeway on this one and went, as you said, in some really interesting directions. He said his pitch to MCU boss Kevin Feige was essentially, "We're going to give you a bigger movie than you've had. But I'm also going to get a little funky." That's where we get random stuff like the long sequence on Hawkeye's farm, or Thor's psychedelic bath, or the Black Widow backstory. Not all of those elements, maybe none of them, work, but it's still fascinating to see how willing Whedon was to do things differently than the first Avengers movie. As a result, Age of Ultron demonstrates Whedon's limits as well as his strengths. He's known as a snappy writer, and shows like Firefly still delight me with their rapid-fire wit. But bits like Cap's language line in the opening battle sequence undercut the character rather than enhance or personalize them. I'm still not sure if Ultron's humor undermines him or not. I fear it might. I don't think it's an accident that Whedon's self-professed love-hate relationship with this film mimics the textual dynamic between Tony Stark and Ultron. Tony wanted to build armor around the world and deploy his Iron Legion as a peacekeeping force that didn't risk human lives, but instead his creation grew into a genocidal maniac. There's quite a large subtext about creating something you love and then watching it turn into an oppressive force beyond your control. Considering the history of superhero comics, replete with writers and artists like Jack Kirby getting denied much of the profit from their brilliant cultural creations, I'm honestly surprised that this Frankenstein myth doesn't pop up more often in these stories. One thing I now find extremely relatable about Ultron in a way I didn't in 2015 is his disgust at the world and humanity. Again, Whedon was by his own account exhausted and broken during the making of this movie, and as a result it has a rather bitter perspective on people. Back then, I wouldn't have said that the internet was a force for bad. But now I look around and I see social media companies stealing and selling my personal information, presidents on Twitter, and endless news parades of death and depression. Let's just say I can see where Ultron's coming from. I actually think this angry disgust works well in the course of the MCU, too. Like, 2 weeks ago you and our buddy Devin Coggin talked about Captain America, Winter Soldier and its political critique of the ways modern Americans put so much trust in our massive security state surveillance apparatus without thinking much about what would happen if the people running that apparatus turned out to be evil. Age of Ultron, by contrast, thinks it's already too late to reconsider. We've gone too far now, Ultron posits, and the only way to amend our mistakes is to destroy all of humanity. Well, let me toss this back to you, Chance, by focusing on the big boy himself.